Good morning, everybody. This is Marty from Dogs Blog, the noontime report of the Frank Carson et al. Trial, October 17, 2018. The jury was scheduled to come in at 10 o'clock so they can finish up the motion today. I thought they were going to finish up yesterday's motion on the misconduct, but what they were talking about is the mannequin that's going to be used to display the jacket to the jury, and the defense has some objections to it. The DA argued that she had several case sites that she addressed to the court. She had sent them to the court the other day in regards to the mannequin and displays. It shows how the bullets are fired, the path that was taken. There was some what they call brooding, which is the path and what the bullet does to clothing and different types of materials. And she says, and there is, of course, a light source in the case. The light source is there to illustrate the holes and the rods that are going to be used to show the path of the bullet through the jacket and through the upper torso that they're claiming. It also shows that there's two holes in the inner lining of the jacket that can be seen and that coincide with the outer lining of the jacket. Testimony has gone to great lengths in the corroboration of the holes and the measurements. They're talking about Corey Brown, and the rods will show the path which went through both liners. Robert Woody will testify as to hearing a gunshot, but not really seeing the shots personally, just heard it. And typically this type of display is used when they have a body to show the path of the mortal wounds in a body. That cannot be done in this case, so they have to use the mannequin to illustrate it. Again, she cited some more case law and in regards to use of this type of mannequins and such. And it's just something that's used to assist the jury to understand. The mannequin just gives an illustration of a torso. It does not have a head or limbs, I should say. Marlissa Murfer, I noted here, was actually making a very lucid argument and not getting overly emotional, and I felt that it deserved note that she was making I felt was actually a pretty good argument, as she's able to do that at times when she doesn't let her personality get in the way, and she was very, very docile and just made a good legal argument to the court. Percy Martinez argued the cases that she cited were execution type of cases in a homicide. Somebody was on the ground, or they took him out in a laying in wait type of situation. The mannequin will give an appearance of that type of execution. He said, Robert Woody said there was one shot. The DA now is arguing two shots, possibly more. There's no proof of an execution or even a homicide is very clear. The trajectory of a bullet does not explain the issues in this case. As Robert Woody and Corey Kaufman, Robert Woody said Corey Kaufman Robert Woody said that Corey Kaufman was shot one time. This is very prejudicial. The mannequin shows the position of the body, but no one knows what happened. There is no value for this other than prejudice to a jury. It will cause more confusion than clarification. Attorney Hans argued using this in the way they intend to is not appropriate for Corey Brown to do, as he is not an expert in the field of bullet trajectories or that type of thing, where an expert would have to testify to some of the things that an expert is going to testify to anyway. DA is trying to show the mannequin several things. Is going to show the mannequin several times through different witnesses. And they're trying to show the plane of the holes in the they're not just trying to display the holes in the jacket, they're doing more than that. He says it's very misleading for Corey Brown to do this. Hans argued that the trajectory of a bullet has not been determined to his knowledge. The inner lining is not clear of how it lines up with the outer lining, and there's too many unknown factors for that to be determined. It's unknown if the rods could be moved or manipulated to make it look like the path, and Corey Brown, again, is not an expert and has no other information. Robert Woody testified he heard one shot and saw blood in one hole at the scene. Jai Gohel argued the rods have no foundation and it goes to prejudice. As to two fixed objects, it's unknown how the jacket moves one direction or another. It is misleading and argumentative. There are plenty of photos to present the holes in the jacket, both sides, the inner and outer. The jacket itself is the evidence. The prejudicial value is large and is prejudicial. Marlissa Ferrer says, it's not true where the 2 points to project a trajectory, they're talking about the points of the jacket, the holes in the outer jacket and the inner liner. And many skull shots do not show the trajectory. In many cases it's not done, as it cannot be. Also, there are radiologists that can testify on the tracking through gases and what have you in the body, the tracking of a bullet. The trajectory is a downward slope. It was an execution, and the victim was unarmed and beaten down. Defense is arguing argument and not putting out any facts. The display shows the path of the bullet, and the officer has testified to that, or will testify to that. She said that Robert Woody did testify hearing one shot, but the issue with witnesses is constantly they do not hear the correct number of shots that are fired in these type of cases. It is not a illustration of it is just an illustration of the jacket and nothing more, and it shows a bullet has passed. A bullet has passed through at high speed. She says there is more prohibitive value than prejudicial. It is not a likeness of the decedent. It's just a clean, illuminated mannequin, and where the holes do line up. Judge Inigo asked what the DOJ, Department of Justice expert, would say. The DOJ said that there's measurements and put under microscope. Measurements of where the holes are, the location of the holes in the jacket, put under microscope, looking at the fibers and how some fibers are melted and such things. And she says it's also 22 caliber holes in the clothes. Asking that what the detective will testify, she says that Corey Brown will testify to the holes and the relationships of the holes to each other's and the correlation to the outer and inner linings. The DOJ gives more microscopic evidence. DOJ did not do an exam. DOJ did not do an exam with the rods, but did more checks for other type of testimony and evidence. Judge Inigo said one argument the DA is making is favorable to the prosecution, of course, is what they're doing. The burden is on the people. The issue is the DA has to establish proper evidence of homicide that is different from the prelim. And this is different as a prelim, as the defense cannot establish the credibility of Corey Brown. There is no difference. And she's talking about the way they have to, some of the changes in the preliminary testimony that can be done and trial testimony, because you're sitting in front of a jury, that have to be done. The jacket is on a mannequin. It cannot be manipulated to prove the trajectory. Cites the Penal Code section 1417.3 in regards to evidence in court. The DA made an argument about something about the evidence in court, and but there is a section where the evidence can be released after a case or a trial to be secured because of the biohazard nature and safety of the court people. She says both sides are right as to the 352 issue and the evidentiary value issues. Robert Woody did say just one shot, but during the prelim where the DA had access to the DOJ info as to 2 shots, and the defense had argued this, that the district attorney was making an argument about 2 shots being fired, but that information at the time had never been turned over to the defense. And there was a big hubbub about that. She said, Robert Woody said in a call to his son from the jail that there were 2 shots at one time. Defense has a good argument of position of the body and position of the jacket and hoodie. But there's no different than the jacket being laid out on a table. The jacket is relevant to the issue at hand. The light inside is extremely problematic because the light turns on the inside and glows. This is a transparent mannequin, and the light comes on the inside and glows the inside of the mannequin, looking like a life force. She says that she's not going to allow the light to be used. She tells the DA that she has to clarify to the jury the position of the hoodie and the position of everything involved, instead of that this is not necessarily representing what the position was of the victim at the time. It's just how they're displaying the jacket, and that's all they're doing this for. She also said if there's an issue during deliberations, if they want to see inside the jacket or turn the light on, then they will deal with that issue at the time. But the light is not going to be used at this time. Jai Gohill asked her about the rods, because the judge seemed to have forgotten totally about the rods. And so she didn't really say that. We took a break, and Hans went up and inspected the rods, and Jai Gohill, I believe, did too during the break to get a good look at those. And Hans also arguing that there's no previous information in regards to the discovery that the DA just gave about the bullet, and there's no ballistics, but the DA said that some experts will be called about the gas going through the body, the radiologist and all that stuff, the traveling of the bullet, it gives a trace and all that stuff. Asked to examine the evidence prior to the testimony. That's what they did at the break. Jai said there's no notice of ballistics and will move the rods around. The judge said it's fair game. You can take a look at that jacket during the testimony and do whatever you need to do. Hans also requested a 402 hearing in regards to some of this other testimony, the evidential value of the ballistics that supposedly are done. There's really no ballistics on the bullet itself, but there's the ballistics of the bullet that supposedly traveled through the jacket and some of that other information. He's asking a 402 hearing. The judge did grant that. And just to clarify, the 402 hearing is an evidentiary hearing to see if if there's actually evidence of that. So at this time, the judge asked Marlissa Ferrer what evidence that she has left for Corey Brown to testify to. She has the Google images, the chain of custody of some things. There were some search warrant things, just some peripheral stuff, some of the legal stuff that needs to be done. Judge also asked Marlissa Ferrer if it's her contention that Corey Kaufman was on the ground when he was killed, and it was an execution type of killing, because that's kind of what she said a few minutes ago. She says Corey is not on the ground, but he is lower than the shooter, like he's stooping over or maybe on his hands and knees or something. I really don't know what she's saying, but he's stooping down and below the shooter. So the judge decided that she is going to allow the 402 on the trajectory and the expert's testimony. The jury finally came up at 10:53 a.m. Corey Brown was on the stand, and he started out with evidence number 527, I believe it was. It was a picture of the foam off the tongue of one of the shoes, and talked about discolorations. Some of those discolorations are probably caused by vegetation, animals, and what have you. If what Robert said, what he said, that some of that discoloration could be blood too. Remember, the boots were tested and no blood was found. He was doing some basic stuff of chain of custody to establish when it was removed from evidence. There was times it was taken for testing. There were some things that were taken for pictures, or sometimes they were taken for the preliminary hearing. So they talked about some of that stuff. They talked about dates, and I'm not going to go through every date. There's no need to. But again, they got into the boot box where the different things were in there. The tongues were in there, some different things. There was the liner that's not part of the shoe. It was a separate liner that you put in the bottom of the shoe. There were some discolorations on that. They talked about the jacket, some dates on that, when it was moved, when it was tested. They went and talked about the search warrant on West Main Street, 115 of 2012. A search warrant on the property. He contacted and talked to Valley Carson and Rhonda Erickson. He took the lead on this operation. He said they advised them that they were investigating a missing person case and asked to search. Valley Carson said they need to talk to Frank. He searched anyway because he had a valid search warrant, and he let her read a copy of the search warrant. He also said Frank Carson was established as owner of the property. 115 in 2012, they booked some items that were taken on 115 in 2012, and on 117 2012 they were booked, the items that were seized. There was 3 laptop computers, 4 disposable cameras, and then he talked about on 117 in 2012 an interview of Robert Woody. There was an objection to that. I don't know what the objection was. It sounded like when they got back, they went to a sidebar that it wasn't allowed to talk about because they didn't talk about it. She went into another line of questioning. He talked about when he went to Scott McFarland's house on 8/19 of 2015, there was an objection to that also. Again, another sidebar. When she came back from sidebar, she went to another subject again. The wiretap, he was a wiretap supervisor. I guess she just had established more of a foundation is what it looks like. He talked about Daljeet Atwal and Scott McFarland phone call. He went to Scott McFarland's house after that phone call, and he said he saw a rototiller on Scott McFarland's property. He had done no searches prior to that. There was a red rototiller. It was, he said it seemed to be older and not in great shape. And Scott McFarland brought it to him and let him take it. He says that he seized that rototiller as evidence. He talked about he had received the CD from Google in regards to satellite images, and this was for Poppencork and 838 9th Street. They went through these photos one by one. There was Google image on 9/16/11, 1190 East Street at Poppencork. He said he had also gone to the property, into the field area through the main gate, and he was describing as an open lot. The next image, each one of these images, and I'm not going to break it down to each one, but he's talking about images that range in dates from 9/16/11, 5/15 of 12, 8/24 of 12, 9/16 of 11. These different dates and the changes in the lot and the color in the lot. Some of this is during summertime when the grass is going to turn brown. Some of it could be other things, but he's saying there's discolorations in the properties on certain dates. And there was a lot of objections to this because Jai Gohel was claiming that one of those brown areas he's talking about is actually a tree, the leaves on a tree. The same thing occurred with the satellite photos of 838 9th Street. There was a lot of talk about any changes in the property. The double-decker bus they talked about was there on every photo, but there was some other changes, he says, to the property, and same type of thing on both times. At this point, it was getting close to 12. The jury went out at 11:52, and they were sent to lunch. Corey Brown was chased out of the courtroom. He wanted to kind of sit there and enjoy the moment, I guess, and he was chased out of the courtroom. And Jai Gohel addressed the court his objection to some of these photos in Poppencork, specifically number 555, evidence number 555. He said everything that Corey Brown said about the photos, he has no way to know if it's grass, if it's a tree. These pictures are taken from about 10, 12 miles up, whatever it is. And it is, he says, the one he knows for a fact is a tree because he's been there, he's looked at it. Corey Brown is basing an opinion, not fact. There is no foundation for what he is saying. And Judge Iniga says she disagrees, but not saying that he could not be wrong, because he could be. And this is all subject to cross-examination. She can see there are trees in the area, and again, this can be taken care of on cross-examination. So that's where we broke for lunch. We'll come back for more of this afternoon. She said that she was limited in some of the things she can go to with Corey Brown because they wanted to do the path of the bullet and all that stuff. I think they're going to say do it with DOJ, or they want to at least have a hearing on it. So Marlissa Ferreira indicated earlier that she didn't have any other witnesses scheduled for today, so she may have to try to dig up another witness for this afternoon or something. I don't know. So that's it for today. We're back at 1:30. Don't forget the podcast tonight. I messed up real bad last night, and I put it on private mode when I should have done public so nobody could see it, and everybody was calling me. And my fault, my bad. I'm sorry. Growing pains. It is what it is. So I had my head up my butt on that one. So we'll do better tonight, and you can listen live, and you can send your messages on Messenger or what have you when I'm doing the podcast. That's it. See you tonight at 6 o'clock on the podcast.